There are worlds out there where the skies are burning, where the seas are asleep and the rivers dream. People made of smoke and cities made of song. Some of those danger, some others injustice. Somewhere else the tea's getting cold. Somewhere else the tea's getting cold. Come on, Ace. We've got work to do. So, after 26 seasons and 155 stories, the classic Doctor Who series comes to an end. This is going to be a long review, folks. Get comfortable. Hello, Whovians, and welcome to my final review of the classic series. I can't believe I'm here. The 155th story in the classic series, which is the last one, Survival, which stars Sylvester McCoy in his final story as the 7th Doctor, although technically it's his penultimate story because he regenerates in the TV movie. Also Ace's final story, and it's the last story of season 26. And it's actually Anthony Ainley's last story as the Master as well. So, Survival. Well, this is going to be a very special review, folks. So, I do apologise if this one is a bit long, but you'll have to bear with me because there is a lot to talk about with this. The plot of this story is as follows. The Doctor brings Ace back to her hometown of Perivale. Her old friends are being kidnapped by a race of alien hunters called the Cheetah People, who are shown the way to Earth by the Doctor's old enemy, the Master. That's the plot of Survival. Survival, you know, obviously at the time they didn't know that the classic series was going to be cancelled, and you know, it's a real shame that it was, of course, and it's not intended to be a finale as such, but if they had to go out in some way, then they could not have gone out any better. I love Survival. Survival is amazing. This is quite possibly my favourite Sylvester McCoy story. This story is fantastic. I love Survival. It is ironically titled now, of course, because this was the last story before they cancelled the show, which is a real shame. What I love about Survival is the fact that this story is just simple. It doesn't try to be overcomplicated. Moffat, cough. It just knows what it is, and it knows how to execute itself. Unlike Ghostlight, which is a bit convoluted, I found this story to make perfect sense. I could follow it completely fine. This story is a balls-to-the-wall action thrill ride, and I love it. This also contains Sylvester McCoy's most badass moment as the Doctor when he's riding on the motorbike, facing off against Mitch, and then there's that explosion. I mean, that is an epic scene. They were really trying hard with this story. They really didn't want to have this show be cancelled. First of all, let's get this out of the way. The Cheetah People themselves, I think they're okay. I mean, I think the costumes are a little bit silly. I mean, you can kind of tell they're just people dressed in costumes. They're a little bit fancy dress party-esque, but I'll forgive it. It's good enough. It'll do. This is the last story of Classic Who, so it's fine. The story is great because they literally go to this planet and they are fighting for survival. It's kill or be killed. The stakes are so high. Even Ace's friends, who you don't really get to know very well. That's my one criticism of the story. You don't really get to know her friends that well. It's like a sort of Hunger Games battle royale, fight to the death, and every one of these characters is pushed to the edge, and it's a really, really thrilling story. You could argue it's quite violent, actually, but I think in a good way. It's not overly violent or grim or grotesque. It's done in a really exciting and dramatic way. Because obviously, with the planet itself, if you stay on it for too long, you will eventually turn into one of these creatures. If you just do nothing, you will manage to stay as yourself for a bit longer. It's only when people start to sort of kill each other, when they really sort of evolve into one of these cheetahs. The Master is sort of controlling it because he has more of a will to. Ace sort of turns into one, but she sort of doesn't. She's in the process of turning into one of these cheetahs, but she doesn't quite make it because she bonds with one of the cheaters who is known as Kara. We think Kara is a villain, but actually it turns out Kara is good, and Kara does come back to help Ace in the end of the story. But it's very sad what happens to Kara. Kara actually loses her life. She dies, and she turns human again. So she was once human as well. So it's interesting how they've been abducting these people from London, from the streets of London, from Perivale, with these cats. Look, there's literally this black cat that is kind of spotting everybody all around to abduct them. The Master has been kind of controlling what's going on. And then it all comes down to a massive fight to the death with the Doctor and the Master. The fight itself, it doesn't really go on that long, but it's a pretty epic moment for sure. The Doctor raises a skull and he's about to, he's about to destroy the Master, but then he realizes he can't do that because he'll just turn into one of those things. And he needs to get back. He's like, no, we will not fight the cats, or something like that anyway. Sylvester McCoy is fantastic in this story. He is great. This guy proves from his performance here that he was born to play the Doctor. He really was. McCoy, he didn't start out that well, I think, in the part, but as time has gone on, this is his 3rd season now, he really has got this down to a T. He is a badass in this story, and he proves actually how loyal he is to Ace as well. Sophie Aldred in her final performance as Ace, fantastic. Sophie Aldred as Ace is one of my favourite companions now. Fantastic. Honestly, I can't think of a better word to use. Once again, this is a real personal story for Ace because her friends are involved and she doesn't want to see her friends get killed. But yet she shows how compassionate she is and how caring she is towards the creature, towards Kara. And she shows her goodwill. And there's that moment when the Doctor comes over and they're sort of toying about what to do. And the Doctor's thinking maybe he should kill Kara or something. And it's not right. I mean, Ace doesn't believe that should happen, but obviously they have to attend other matters. The character of Mitch, I think, is really good as well, how he ends up turning. The actor really does play him well. You can see how this has really infected him, and he's not the same person by the end. Anthony Ainley as the Master is brilliant. This is his best performance by far. He really is. He's really got this role now. Before, when he first joined, at the end of Tom Baker's era, he was a little bit hammy, I suppose, but as time went on in Davison's era and then in Colin Baker's era, he managed to tone it down a bit, and by this, he gives a very intense performance. It's not as good as Delgado, obviously. Delgado is the best Master, but Anthony Ainley, fantastic, and he's been a pleasure to watch. He really has, and this is a shame that it's his last story, but again, couldn't have gone out on a better note. Shout out to Gareth Hale, who plays Len, Sakuntala Ramani as Shrila, she's very good. David John as Derek. Sean Oliver as Stuart. Kate Eaton as Ange. I'm assuming these are all Ace's friends. They're all very good in this story. I also love the voices of the cheaters. I think Kara's voice is really interesting and it's really sort of scary in quite a way. I like the look of the story as well. The lighting and the post-production. I mean, it almost has a slight Western look to it because they do actually ride on horses quite a lot on this planet. The planet itself looks very desolate, but there's a lot of purple and red in the skies, and the color looks... The color saturations look almost off-kilter, but I like that because it makes the planet feel more alien, and I think that's what makes this story very interesting, is that it's very unsettling from the get-go. The pacing of this story is phenomenal. It moves like a rocket. This is only 3 parts long, but this is how you pace a 3-parter. J&T has done a great job producing this one. The script is written by Rona Munro. There's also another writer called Andrew Cartmel who is credited. But honestly, this is a great script. The idea itself is very simple. It's very basic. But I think it's fine. I think maybe that was what the show needed. It needed to go back to basics to really get the tone and the feel of the older episodes with William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee, Tom Baker. And I believe Survival encapsulates how the show should be, really. It really should be. Even with a simple story, the execution of said simple story is brilliant. This is an expertly directed story, directed by Alan Waring. He has outdone himself this time. He has really made the effort to make this spectacular. It is a spectacular story. It is mainly action thrills, But the idea of the story is simple, but it works. I love the finale of the story. The finale of Survival is one of the best finales in Doctor Who. It is so good. Like I said, the Doctor and the Master have their confrontation on the planet. The Doctor rides the bike with Midge. And then at the end, Ace and the Doctor, they just walk away. And then McCoy gives his speech, which they added in. It's a brilliant way to go out, actually, even though they didn't really know the classic series was going to be cancelled. It's a real nice sort of bittersweet way to end the story, because so much of this story is actually about the emotional struggle for all of them, because the story is literally about survival. It is what it says on the tin, and it's kill or be killed. So there are certain stakes to the story, and I think that the end speech really sums up what the story has been about. And when he says, come on Ace, we've got work to do, that's a great ending. But obviously, the show was cancelled, which was a real shame. The music score is fantastic as well. One of the best music scores I have ever heard in a Doctor Who story, period. So good. So really, I have nothing else to say about Survival. I don't have any flaws, really. I mean, obviously, my flaws would be, if obviously this being the last story of McCoy and Ace, that they would have had exits. But sadly, that's not really a flaw I can say is valid, because the show got cancelled, and that wasn't their fault. So, yeah, it's a real shame. And as it is Sophie Aldred's last story, I will talk about that in a minute. But as for my final rating for Survival, I definitely have to give this story a 10 out of 10. Survival, you know, fantastic. It is just so good. It is so good. Oh, and it breaks my heart that the show was cancelled. Before we go into the further things in this video that I would like to talk about, I have to now rank season 26. So, this is once again a personal list, my own personal opinion. Please do not be angry with me. This is a just subjective ranking. But, yeah, we're entitled to our own opinions. So please leave your rankings down below. At number 4 has to be Ghostlight. Number 3, Battlefield. Number 2, The Curse of Fenric. And, of course, number 1, Survival. Alright, so season 26. Well, it's a great season. Oh yes, it's a much better season than the first 2 McCoy seasons. Season 24 was dreadful. Season 25 was okay, it was a bit better. But this is really good. I like 3 of the stories in this season very much. The only one I'm not keen on is Ghostlight, but it's a very strong season, and it's a shame that this is the last season of Classic Who, but in a way, it's probably better that the stories are this good for the last season. You know, you'd want the lasting memory of Classic Who to be good and not bad, and I'm glad that J&T pulled his finger out his arse, and everybody else managed to work through the circumstances at the time and managed to get these stories good again. It's just such a shame that the ratings were not there. It really is, because season 27 could have been really something. I mean, apparently McCoy was going to leave at the end of the next season, and then Sophie Aldred was going to leave then as well. There was more to see from the 7th Doctor and Ace. There was more to see, but sadly this is it. You know, Sophie Aldred as Ace has been fantastic. Ace is definitely one of the more developed companions on an emotional level. She's one of the few companions who you really connect with on an emotional level, with a lot of the stories in season 26. This was a bit of a springboard, I think, for Russell T Davies when he was going to revive the show in 2005 with Christopher Eccleston, and obviously you have Billie Piper as Rose. So I think Ace is a fantastic companion. Sophie Aldred gives some amazing performances. She's cute as well, in my opinion. She looks really cute. And I think she has a great rapport with Sylvester McCoy. And you could see there were times when McCoy was very dark, and Ace would often question the Doctor. Yeah, Ace is Ace. In my opinion, Ace is Ace, and it is a real shame to see her go. I really do like Ace, and I will always remember her as the very last companion of Classic Who, and a great one at that. And of course, I have to pay tribute to Sylvester McCoy, the 7th Doctor. So, I'm going to get my beer out. I'm going to toast to Sylvester McCoy, the 7th Doctor. Brilliant. You know, Sylvester McCoy is a Doctor who I think, like Davison, grows on you. To begin with, you have to sit through some really shit stories. A lot of McCoy's earlier stories are very shit, in my opinion, which is a real shame. It took a whole season for me to really warm up to Sylvester McCoy's era. But McCoy, you know, he came into the show at a time when the show was on the brink of cancellation anyway. So Sylvester McCoy really had to prove to people that this character could still be done right and the show could still be done right. And I think he did that. And I think McCoy really is one of the more eccentric Doctors. And he's a very eccentric man in real life. So that is probably part of the reason why. But I like his Doctor. He's not my favourite Doctor, but a lot of his stories are kind of mixed. I think his era is very inconsistent, like Davison, but there are a handful of good stories in there, which is good. But there are also some shit ones, especially Time in the Rani. Like I said before in that review, I'm almost embarrassed to say that McCoy has to wear Colin Baker's outfit. I mean, God, it looks even worse on him. And I know that this was not the exit that McCoy intended, but thankfully he will return one last time in the TV movie, which is the next review, where he will regenerate into Paul McGann. Technically, that is his last story, but because this is the last story of his third season, I thought this would be the best time to really give him a proper tribute, a proper send-off, because next time is Paul McGann, and we all know how short Paul McGann's era is, so I don't want to give Paul McGann any less focus. I want to talk about Sylvester McCoy briefly in the next review, but I don't want that to become the main focus. Sylvester McCoy, great Doctor, sad to see him go, but obviously not by his own choice. Cheers, Sylvester. Survival also marks the end of the 80s era of Doctor Who, being that this was transmitted in 1989. It's a real mixed bag. I think the 80s decade of Doctor Who is a really bizarre one. A lot of people don't like the 80s, and I can understand why. I think that it's good overall, but it's very inconsistent. I mean, you start with the end of Tom Baker's era, which is when JNT arrives and makes a lot of changes to the show, and some good, some not so good for me. It's a very mixed bag. Then you've got Davison, and Davison's era is once again very inconsistent. You'll get a classic, and then you'll get a crap story. So the quality really is inconsistent. But there were good things, like you had great companions like Tegan and Nyssa, Ace, you know, with Sylvester McCoy's era. You had the Colin Baker era, which I know I'm not a fan of personally, other than 2 stories. You had Mel, less said about Mel, the better. So overall, there's a mixed bag of stories, but generally the show was fighting to stay on. It was fighting to kind of stay alive, and it managed to last until the end of the 80s. I wouldn't say the 80s is my favourite decade of Doctor Who. It's certainly not as strong as the 60s or the 70s, but it's very good overall. It's good. You know, there are some classics in there. And it was obviously the last decade of the classic series. So good on them for getting this far. But sadly, this is where the buck stops. As for J&T as a producer, John Nathan Turner, much like the decade itself, very inconsistent. He managed to get quite a few classics in there, but I felt like he constantly got the tone of the show wrong. He was either going to stray it too far into darkness or too far into campiness. And he couldn't find the balance in tone, I think. And I think sometimes in the 80s he went a bit too far, especially in Colin Baker's era. And a lot of the problems in that era I do blame on J&T, as well as certain other circumstances. And I'm not saying J&T, you know, is a bad person, you know. I mean, he's a very talented guy for what he did, but I don't think he approached Doctor Who in the way the fans wanted. He did it his own way. He made it his own, fair enough. But I just don't think he got the tone right. But there were times when there were a lot of classic stories in there. The end of Tom Baker's season, Davison's seasons, and Sylvester McCoy's seasons, there were some classics in there. So it wasn't all bad. I don't think I can say it was all bad, but I'll raise a toast to John Nathan Turner. Well, probably one of the longest serving producers of Doctor Who. Chin chin. So, that kind of sums it up, really. I have nothing else to say other than the classic series. Wow, it's done. I can't believe I've got this far. It's really incredible. You know, I started reviewing classic Doctor Who back in 2017 with The Unearthly Child. I reviewed it in February 2017, I believe. So it's taken me nearly 4 years, nearly 4 years to get through the classic series with breaks in between. So I am really honestly very grateful for all the support everybody's given me. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great experience because I was starting reviewing them blind. I hadn't seen any of the classic series before I reviewed it. This was a real treat for me, and I'm honestly very thankful for everything, and all the support. And I feel like I'm now fully caught up with Doctor Who. The only thing I haven't seen is Capaldi's last season, and I haven't seen Jodie Whittaker's era. But before I go, there are a few people I want to thank, because without them, I couldn't have done this, really. So, yeah, if you'll just indulge me for a moment. So, I just want to give a few shout-outs to some people who really have been very supportive to my classic series reviews, because they mean a lot to me, and they're honestly great. So, Kenny75 Photography, thank you very much. Tyler Bolton, Ollie Reviews and Reacts, Sam Harrison, Alan Kalo, Nicholas Payne, who's lent me DVDs, which I really appreciate. Owen Wildish, thank you very much. Mr. Indiscreet, Mr. Arrowverse 16, and finally, Jack the Film Fanatic. Now, Jack is going to get a slightly more of a mention, because Jack has been watching a lot of the stories with me. He's also been a bit of a springboard for me to do the classic reviews, because there were times when my enthusiasm was really dwindling on this, and he managed to persuade me to carry on and finish the classic series. So without him, I really wouldn't be here reviewing Survival. So, Jack, thank you so much, man. You're a true friend. I really appreciate you persisting me to review the classic series, and it means a lot. So this toast is for you, buddy. And to those who didn't get shout-outs, I'm sorry, but all of you are amazing. Thank you for subscribing, and thank you for watching. It really means a lot. So, with that in mind, I've been babbling long enough. Let me finish this review by toasting the classic series of Doctor Who. 1963 to 1989. Woo! I'm very happy to have finished these classic reviews. But the buck does not stop there. Next time, I'm going to be reviewing the one and only feature-length Paul McGann story, the TV movie. But I won't just jump straight into the new series after that. I'm then going to review Night of the Doctor, which is Paul McGann's regeneration story. So I'm going to do a Paul McGann tribute in that video. So I'm going to review McGann's two stories. And then I'm going to do a surprise review of something else, which I've told a couple of you about, but for the sake of the comments section, please do not say anything. So yes, Paul McGann's era coming next, and then a surprise review for Christmas. And then in January 2021, I will start reviewing the new series of Doctor Who with Christopher Eccleston. Woo! So yeah, look forward to that. So next time, my review is the TV movie. All that's left to say is, long live the classic series of Doctor Who. I'm going to be finishing up with two tributes. The first of which is a tribute to Sylvester McCoy. Sylvester McCoy, the 7th Doctor. Cheers. And then finally, the classic series. So, thank you very much all for watching. And until next time, I'm Mr. Tarnus11. See you soon. Bye for now.